Well, we're very happy this morning to have an alumnus to speak to you. We have three of his relatives here in school, two beside me right now, Frist Allen and Harrison Kidd, and also McLean Portis here. McLean, I think, is still up there with the ninth graders, but we're really pleased to have Bill Frist here today, MBA class of 70, and Harrison is going to introduce him.
Alumnus, board member, friend to MBA. Heart surgeon, former majority leader of the U.S. Senate, policymaker for education and healthcare. We are privileged today to hear from someone I know as a family member and a dear friend. I thought the best introduction would be in his own words. From the 1970 edition of The Bell, written by Bill Frist. In 3 weeks, I graduate. I've eagerly waited commencement since I first entered MBA. But now I have mixed emotions. I went to MBA instead of I go to MBA. Somehow it doesn't sound right. My attitudes have changed. I have changed. Sometimes it scares me to think of how much I've changed. In 3 weeks, I will be out of high school. In 3 months, in college. I used to wonder if I'd not be better prepared for college life, independent as it is, if I had been allowed to make more of my own decisions while at MBA. Athletics or not, long hair or short. You know, my friends at other schools are never reminded to get their hair cut. But now it strikes me that MBA is not like other schools. It doesn't want to be. MBA is on a hill. Its ideals are to produce the combined gentleman, scholar, and athlete, and it does just that. MBA is a preparatory school. It directs us through some of the most formative years of our lives. Some people say it molds us. Maybe. But nevertheless, we leave MBA better equipped to cope with the decisions tomorrow. And to think, some of us complain because we can't wear blue jeans to school. MBA is on a hill. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Bill Frist.
Harrison, thank you. I remember writing those words, and I was where you seniors said almost exactly now in 1970, a long time ago. My message is really pretty simple today, and it's a message of exploration, it's a message of discovery, it's a message of dreaming. It begins with the words of Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones that you did. Sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, discover. Two examples. Explore the world of science. It's what I've done in 20 years in medicine, that I've continued today, that I continued to last Friday when I was at Vanderbilt. I was on a panel. The panel was about a cagey little virus called Ebola. Ebola, many of you have not heard of probably up until a few months ago or 6 months ago, and it's a cagey little virus because it's always changing. There is no real treatment for it. There is no cure for it. There is no vaccine for it. It's a virus that initially started in little fruit bats down in Central Africa, and then all of a sudden jumped to a human. And now, and we don't fully understand it all, but now that it's in a human, it goes from one person to another person to another person to another person to another person. In 1976, the last time that little virus emerged, that's where it would stop 4 people. For some reason, in part because of urbanization and coming together and travel, it's gone from person to person to person to person. Instead of dying out, it goes to person to person to person to person through 8 people before it dies out. And the difference is in 1976, where it killed maybe 200 people, right now we have a virus right this second that is out of control, that has infected 12,000 people, 6,000 of whom have already died. 2 people in the United States. This idea of dreaming about a cure, it's not here yet, of discovery. It's going to take discovery in terms of a vaccine, in terms of treatment. My generation has not dealt with it very well. The last time we had to is when we did with another little cagey virus called HIV/AIDS. HIV/AIDS did not exist when I was sitting where you were sitting not that long ago. It did not exist as a virus. And then in 1981, when I was a resident up in Mass General, it killed 5 people. Then it killed 1,000. And then it killed 500,000. Then it killed 1 million. Then it killed 3 million. Then it killed 15 million. Then it killed 23 million people. Before America woke up, before we had this discovery of a treatment. When you look at me, I spent a long time in 12 years in the United States Senate. People say, why did you leave this world of science to go to the United States Senate? And it was this whole idea of discovery and exploration and dreaming. And by going to the United States Senate and marrying science and the fact that we didn't fully understand science with the public policy arena, we, the government that represents you, President George W. Bush, Democrats and Republicans working together, Americans working together, made a $15 billion commitment to dream about a cure and then to discover that cure. And because of that action, that nexus of public policy, that nexus of science, today there are 10 million people alive based on 3 paragraphs written by a few senators and a few congressmen under the leadership of a president of the United States. Ebola, why does it matter? Why does Ebola matter to you when you see it? Because right now to this day, there's no vaccine for it. There's no treatment for it. Everybody that's dying from it is not dying, just so you'll know, they're not dying from this hemorrhagic component that you see on TV, but from what's called hypovolemic shock, the heart itself. Just the fluids disappear from the body, and when the fluids disappear, the heart just gives out. Why is it important to you? It's important to you because in America we're underinvesting in the infrastructure to reverse disease and pestilence really around the world. For the first time, we see, just kind of like HIV/AIDS in recent times, a virus that is in Central Africa of people that of different skin color and ethnicity and geography and socioeconomic status. Why do we send taxpayer dollars to Africa? And for the first time recently, it's being answered because it's here on our shores now with no treatment. And it could be in your community. It's not going to be in your community because we've got it under control now, but it could be in your community. Ebola comes by airplane. It's 8 hours away from here today. I'll just leave you with one question to think about on the Ebola, and that is, when I was in Dallas, Texas, and the patient was about to die the next day, about 6 weeks ago, everybody came to me and said, you're going to be on CNN, you're going to be talking to the President of the United States, you're going to be talking to the leaders of Congress, and I said, yep, and they said, basically, let's shut down all travel from Central Africa. Should we do that? It's transmission, so clearly if we don't let anybody in, the virus will stop and will die out. It'll never come to our shores. Should we do that? So I'll ask you to think about it. I won't give you the answer to that. But right now the political movement is to shut down the travel of 100,000 people over time from Central Africa to the United States. Should we do it? Talk about it over Thanksgiving. See what you come up with. Dreaming and discovery. Second example. Last week, 2 weeks, 10 days ago, I was in Cuba. Cuba is a country. How many of you have been to Cuba? Raise your hand. 1, 2. I predict within 10 years, 70% of you will have been to Cuba. I've never been to Cuba. I've been to 44 countries. I've done surgery in about 20 different countries. I've never been to Cuba until about 6 weeks ago. I've been twice in the last about 6 weeks. Why do I, at this point, go to Cuba? It's because a sense of curiosity. I've spent a lot of time in the Sudan, I've spent a lot of time in Ethiopia, I've spent a lot of time in the African continent, in Bangladesh and in India, exploring, doing medical practice and doing surgery. And right now, Cuba, in my mind, is the last pioneering country. It's 90 miles off the coast. In 1959, Fidel Castro was one of the revolutionaries that brought a revolution to Cuba, not about communism and not about what we saw in the Cold War, but really about inequities, about racial inequities, about health inequities. It's the poorest country in the world now. Why did I go there? Because of this curiosity. The curiosity of, listen to this, the United States is by far the richest country in the world. We have by far the very best health care. The last time I was in this room, I gave a talk on talking about transplanting the human heart, which is what I've done professionally, taking a heart out of one person, putting it in another, and a lung out of one and putting it in another. And I did it routinely. I did it every day. Cuba does not do that. It's the poorest country in the world. But, and talk about this over Thanksgiving, Cuba if you're going to have a baby, you want to have it in Cuba, and you don't want to have it in Nashville, Tennessee. What's called the infant mortality, which is one of the measures of outcome, and that is how many kids die per 1,000 births. The infant mortality statistic, the survival rate, is better in one of the poorest countries in the world than it is in our neighborhood right here in Nashville, Tennessee, or in the United States of America. We have the biggest healthcare industry in the world right here in Nashville, Tennessee, with the biggest hospital companies and ambulatory surgery companies, and many of your parents and friends work there. Well, right in our neighborhood, the vaccination rate is better in Cuba. The survival rate for kids is better in Cuba, among the poorest countries in the world. So when you talk about service and you're all involved in your service projects, there's a lot to be done right here at home. So I went to Cuba to explore it, then I'll finish. Because I didn't know, for every 1,000 births in the United States, 7 kids die, 7 babies die. In Nashville, Tennessee, if you look across and compare to the rest of the country, we're worse than that. For every 1,000 births, 8 children die in Nashville, within 2 miles of where we're sitting now. Worse than the national average, but worse than the average of Cuba. In Cuba, only 4 children die. This is one of the basic public health measures of outcome of how good a population is to itself in terms of health. We are unhealthier than the people in Cuba, in spite of being the richest country in the world by far. In spite of the fact we spend 18% of our gross domestic product, 1 out of every $5 is spent on health care to be healthy, yet in terms of survival, we're 26 in terms of how long you're going to live, 78, 79, 80 years of age, and in infant mortality, compared to the rest of the world, we're 21st. Those are big figures, but the problem is right here in Nashville, Tennessee, where your service projects make a difference, where it's not how good Bill Frist is in transplanting hearts or how good Vanderbilt or HCA or Baptist or St. Thomas is, but it's the social determinants which determine how long people live, how fulfilling a life they live, and that's where your service projects are absolutely key. What did I find? On the ground, they have all these official indoctrination programs, but you can slip off. And what I found, the reason is the following. Among the reasons is the following. It's because Bill Frist is a transplant surgeon, trained at Harvard, trained at Stanford, trained at Mass General, trained at MBA, did the best training in the world, and did hundreds and hundreds of heart transplants. But what the United States does not do well, that Cuba does do well, is look at primary care and look at those social determinants. For every woman that's going to have a baby in Cuba, they have 12 prenatal before birth visits. In the United States of America, the average person having a child has 1 visit. The primary care doctors within a mile of all 11 million people living in Cuba, everybody has a primary care doctor that they know. In the United States of America, only 20%, 1 out of 5 people have a primary care doctor that they know, and they have a hard time getting into them. So my message really to you is to dream, to explore, and to discover. Much of my life is spent overseas, but it's right here in Nashville, Tennessee as well. I'm about to put together a project. It'll be an 8-year project, and I'm going to ask many of you for your support to look at why we're having such a hard time here in Nashville. Now, Williamson County does fine. The surrounding counties have done fine. But right now, in terms of how long people will live, we're the worst. We're 13th in the state. The state of Tennessee is 46th in the country in terms of health. Childhood survival, we're right at the bottom of the United States of America right here in Nashville, Tennessee. The neat thing about it is that you can change the vaccination rate from 40 to 80% by participating in service projects. McLean Portis has the same, his great-grandfather, as is Frist Allen's, as is Harrison Kidd's, is a man who served on this board for 20 years, Dr. Thomas Frist. That is my father. He spoke on humility. It was back in 1968 when I was sitting right up here where Frist and Harrison did. That humility and that commitment to lifting others up in a way that is humble, that is quiet, that is soft-spoken, take that with you. That same message that he delivered to you, to me, and to our generation, take that message forward as well. One last commitment, because all of this stuff is kind of vague and big, and then it's out there, and it has to do with acting and acting now and commitment. Goethe, the great German philosopher and poet, in many ways a great healer of all time, said, "The moment one definitely commits oneself, then all sorts of things begin to happen. Providence moves too. Things happen to help that we never would have otherwise had anticipated. A whole stream of events and issues come from that decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance which no man could have dreamed would ever come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius and magic and power in it. Begin it now." Thank you.